Hello again, everyone. You're joining us for another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. My name is Geoff Micks. I'm head of content and research. My guest today is Jason Lioy of Dawn Foods. He hosted a roundtable discussion during lunch at the North American HR Executive Summit on the topic of building diversity, equity, and inclusion programming from the ground up and really getting them alive, which was very generous of him to host it. But of course, it's a lunch. There's 10 people around a table, all interested in the topic, and he has very generously agreed to talk a little bit about what was said there, some of the takeaways. Jason, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Could we start off with why you picked this topic? Because you have some flexibility. You could have been talking about benefits, or lots of things fall under the role of an HR professional in this day and age. Why diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, for quite a few reasons. One, we've been on a great journey at Dawn for the last 4.5, 5 years. And there's a lot that we can celebrate at our company. And from my perspective and from the perspective of the industry, because the baking industry is relatively unique insofar as the fact it's a very traditional industry. There's not a lot of high tech. I mean, we're just coming along from a technology perspective, just coming along for various initiatives. But the baking industry in general is evolving.
Traditional in the sense of using the same technology for 100 years kind of thing.
Right, handed down generation to generation. I mean, if you look at any baker, most of them have come from families and or just things passed down from person to person to person. And that follows suit with employment practices in the industry too. And so we've been evolving as a company, and we've got a great story to tell. And it was an easy topic for me to select for this lunch session. At Dawn, we don't specifically call out our initiatives as diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives. We call them people and culture initiatives.
Tell me a little bit about Dawn Foods.
Yeah, so we're a 100-year-old company. We've been owned by the same family for over 85 years. And we have values that are steeped in how good our people are or how inclusive we are as a company. But we've never really formalized it in terms of programs. So what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to come out with initiatives that are labeled as programs. We wanted to come out with a holistic approach to how we are very inclusive of our people. And this lunch session was all about how we created that. And it started from really taking people at the top of what we do as a business. And it was easy to do because our circle of excellence, which is our moniker, our internal moniker, starts with people at the top of a circle. So it was very easy to translate all that in terms of how we approach our employment practices, how we approach our training, how we approach our succession. It's all from an inclusive people perspective. And by default, by doing that and by labeling it in a way that people could understand and it wasn't some new thing, it was more easily adopted by our population at large.
Now, when I think of a lunch conversation, of course, you have a great story to share. Mm-hmm. I'm not looking for you to name names, but there were other people who came around. Were you surprised by any of the groups that came to your lunch, or were there some that, big companies, small companies? Give us a sense of who was there.
It ranged. It ranged from a very small healthcare company to a very large multi-conglomerate building products company to a very large technology company. But one thing that was very evident in the lunch is that one of the keys to success for Dawn was leadership support and leadership buy-in. Now, granted, I had to sell. We had to sell as an organization a lot of our initiatives, but we very easily got leadership buy-in because we were able to tell a story to various initiatives, whether it comes to executive hiring that was more diverse, the way you construct your board, to the way you go to market in terms of the communities that you serve. It was very easy for us to get a lot of buy-in.
Actually, I'd love for you to expand a little bit on persuading senior leadership on these initiatives, because I think that's something a lot of people are also on that same path, and right. Any points you can give would be appreciated, I'm sure.
Right. From our perspective at Dawn, it was an easy sell to our leadership team and to my CEO and to the board, because they knew that it was important because of the family values that we cherish at Dawn. And at the lunch, it was I was happy to hear that other folks had somewhat of a similar experience in terms of being able to get leadership buy-in, and they were just looking for tools and tricks to get that sell to their executive C-suite. But it was also disheartening to hear a couple of companies saying, "I've tried that, and it didn't work, and I'm just not getting the buy-in." So we had to have another conversation of how can you approach it in a way that maybe you can get buy-in from a business perspective from the ground up, because they have a very diverse population as their employee base, but their leadership isn't representative of that diverse population. So how can you create that pressure, if you will, to get that buy-in to drive more diversity at that higher leadership level? So it was a great conversation at lunch. But again, like I said, I was happy to hear some perspectives, and I was encouraged to hear some perspectives, but also disheartened to hear some perspective, because it means that still there's a lot of companies out there that still have a long way to go.
And I think that's why conversations like the one you had at lunch is important. It's not everyone is pulling on the same oar and going the same distance. Everyone is sort of on their own journey. Was there anything in the conversation that surprised you at all, that maybe you thought, oh, that's what I'm going to take away from the lunch from my own perspective?
Yeah, I would say the one thing I took away from the lunch, and one individual in particular shared this, was the way you measure some initiatives and the way you approach it from a quantitative perspective. We do a lot of measures, but we're not as purposeful in our measurement at Dawn as we should be. One of it's because we have just now started to get access to that data. So I got her information, and we're going to share some more stories together, and she's going to share with me the way she measures some of her initiatives, and puts them in a scorecard for her board, because we need to do a better job of that as well. So it was a great feedback point for me.
Yeah, and of course you went into this lunch with your own success story that you wanted to showcase. Were there particular things from your experience that really resonated with the group?
Yeah, the one thing that really resonated with the group they had a long conversation about was our engagement journey, and how we've evolved our engagement survey, and how we've incorporated more of the frontline feedback, because there were several folks that were part of manufacturing companies that have heavy frontline populations that can't get that participation in their surveys. So they're languishing at that 60% participation rate, because they can't get it over the hump with their manufacturing base. So we've been able to get over that hump because we were able to incorporate a technology solution that was able to engage our frontline to participate in the survey. Because we made a hard decision we made a very tough decision to make it so we don't have paper. About 4 years ago, we said we're not going to have paper anymore. We're going to do it all from a technology perspective and drive engagement in that respect in terms of participation. And it's worked very, very well. We have over 80% participation in our engagement survey.
Wow.
The highest that we've ever had. And that's with almost a 70% frontline population. So we talked a lot about those strategies.
I want to follow up on that a little bit, if you don't mind. My ears perk up, because those are some real results. And I have a lot of conversations with service and solution providers saying that's what they'd like their tool to be able to do, to hear it from an end user. Again, you don't need to name names of the technology, but you have this engagement tool that frontline workers are actually using the way you would hope it would work. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so it's an SAP product, and we're a full SAP house, if you will, from our HCM and other tools, and it's a tool that SAP uses for gathering sales data, market data, etc. It's Qualtrics, and I can say that because I'm happy to share who we use. But they were able to provide solutions, QR codes and other solutions that were able to be uniquely identified with that end user, but also all at the same time keeping confidentiality, which is very important to that population as well, because they somewhat they're skeptical of it. But we were able to work through those wants and those needs from our population. They were able to provide the solution, and I know all the survey solutions out there should have that as a solution for your frontline. Otherwise, they shouldn't be in the business, because it's one of the biggest populations out there that needs to get that feedback. We need to get that feedback because that's the majority of our population. And if we can't design solutions from a DE&I perspective or any perspective, if we can't design solutions that have those folks in mind, then it's not worth doing. And that was actually one of the other comments that came up during lunch. It was, how do you design programs with the front line in mind? And it's like, well, that's the first question. Can the frontline folks use this?
Yeah.
If they can't, then it should be tabled, or it should be adopted in a way that you can actually get that utilization.
And I love that you spoke to the idea of trust, because if you're asking for honest input from somebody and they are the grassroots, they are only going to give that if they think it will do a benefit, and also that there will not be a negative repercussion for
Correct.
speaking their piece.
Yeah.
I want to circle back just a minute. There was someone who was saying, I have really struggled to persuade a leadership that this has value, and I wonder if there's a way we can connect honest grassroots surveying as providing the data, providing the metrics, showing a leadership that may be stuck in its ways, that like this is the future, and if you don't do it, our competitors will, because
Right.
there's always a way to connect DEI to business performance. I mean, it's the future, right?
Right.
Is that anywhere that your lunch conversation went?
A little bit. It was more of like where you can show those correlation points, especially when it comes to engagement. Engagement of your workforce tends to have a one-to-one ratio of highly engaged workforces tend to have better business results. Higher engaged, frontline workforces tend to have better productivity results in the plants. I mean, the data shows it. If you have a very if you have very low engagement in one particular plant, typically that plant is the least productive. And vice versa, right? There's generally a very good correlation with that fact. So being able to provide those measures and that data that shows productivity is down because maybe that one plant or that one group of folks don't feel like they belong in the company, they don't feel like they're engaged, they don't feel like the company cares. That's a very easy data point to show that senior leadership team, like, listen, if we want to get more out of this group, if you want to get higher sales in your markets, if you want to get higher, you name the measure from a business perspective, let's raise engagement, right? Let's raise belonging. Don't couch it just as a DE&I initiative because that's what everyone's talking about now. Talk about it from a perspective that's like, if you raise up the bar in this measure for your employee population, it's going to drive business results. And in our business, we've seen higher engagement, higher business results, and we've seen year over year performance gains, and we've also seen corresponding engagement scores go up as well.
I wonder if we could finish our conversation by talking a little bit more about trust. We talked about the grassroots engagement, employee engagement. We talked about earning buy-in at the top. Really, throughout an organization, it needs to be able to have conversations about how to move forward in a positive way. And if you could speak a little bit about that from your perspective at Don Foods or from some of the other people around that table,
Right.
what are we talking about?
Yeah, so I think that trust is one of those foundational elements in an organization that without it, you can do nothing else. Like, you could come in with the best program, you could come in with the best idea, and if your top leader doesn't trust you, and when I say trust, it's not like they don't trust you like as a person, like as a human. Like, they just don't trust that you have all the data or that you don't have all the information that went into this program, then they can say, yes, this program is going to add value. So that's one component of trust. And then the other element of the trust, the trust equation is that does your employee base trust that you're going to do something with this information? When you ask for feedback in an engagement survey, not only is it anonymous, is it easy to do, is it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, do they trust that you're going to do something with it, right? Because that's one of the biggest fails that organizations have, is that they ask for information and they do nothing with it. So why would I give you more information ever again? Because you're not going to do anything with it. I mean, I was part of this is a separate conference, but I was part of a group that discussed engagement, and there was a senior leader there that said, we don't ask questions that we're not going to do anything with. And it was powerful At the same time, I was like, ooh, that feels a little bit off, or feels a little bit rough. But at the same time, it's pretty powerful. We only ask the questions that we're actually going to do something with. So, as an organization, if you want to drive any initiative, whether it's DE&I or any other initiative, the senior leadership team has to trust that you have all the information that has gone into your program to be able to sell it to them from an easier basis. But also, the employee population has to trust that you're going to do something with this information that they're providing you with whatever vehicle that you're utilizing, whether it's an engagement survey, a focus group, et cetera, you name it. They have to be able to have that trust in you. And I say you as a CHRO or a CPO or whatever you want to call yourself, because you represent them. You are their advocate, and you're the business's advocate. So you're kind of like you're caught between two worlds, in a good way, if that's the job that you want, because it's one of the most powerful jobs out there, because you can drive business through people, and you can drive business through the actual business levers that you have as an organization, but it's all centered around trust.
What a fantastic note to end on. I want to thank you again, Jason, for your time and sharing what happened in that lunch conversation with a wider audience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. I've been Geoff Micks. Let's do it again soon.